Back from the break, and what I was doing there was going for a walk on my double pedal. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. And the reason I was doing that is because I'm now into 60s rock and roll, and one of the first chaps I would like to talk to is the crazy Keith Moon, God bless his little socks. And what happens with Keith Moon is Keith Moon was famous for not having a hi-hat. His very earliest footage that you can find of him, he did have the typical drum kit. But by the time he got, or by the time The Who got to about 1964, 65, no more hi-hat. Just another tom there. He had cymbals around, and two bass drums, one of the first to do so in that kind of style. Let me backtrack. He wasn't the first to have two bass drums. That's attributed to Louis Bellson in the jazz world. Okay, a lot of people think double bass drumming is the land of metal. It's not. It's the land of everything, but it actually first originated with Louis Bellson in the jazz world. But Keith Moon had two bass drums. A lot of his style was just walking on the pedals, and he's like one of the tricks, if you will, but this is the part of his charm, his genius. I don't think Keith Moon was ever called charming. Anyway, he was a little bit of an animal of rock and roll, but crazy. But he had this innate sense of following the melody line. And with The Who, that was, he and John Entwistle were the rhythm section of rock. I mean, John Entwistle's bass sounded like a jet taking off, and with Keith Moon being explosive underneath, what a combo! Just couldn't go wrong. And the Who are just legends. And a lot of what he did, when you're hearing things like Who Live at Leeds and stuff like that, you'll just hear a solid bass drum all the way through, just right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, or whatever it might be. So you might have. And of course, there's probably one of the most loved licks is the solo drum part to Won't Get Fooled Again off the 1971 album Who's Next. But he was already doing lots of fantastic stuff on things like Tommy. Of course, I've mentioned Who Live at Leeds, one of the great live albums. A lot of their singles pre-Tommy, things like Pictures of Lily and Happy Jack and My Generation, of course, and things like that, Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere, and all that sort of stuff. These great singles, there was always a great little drum lick in them, that kind of thing. There was always that little thing that when I was just a kid going, wow, how did he do that, And that's Keith Moon. Notice I haven't talked about Ringo of the Beatles and all that. I really like Ringo, and I find that his playing style is incredibly underrated, much like Meg of the White Stripes, because I love her drumming it as well, because Meg White and Jack White, I'm gone right off the track for a second, but that's my way, organic, fantastic stuff. But back to Ringo. Ringo Starr and Keith Moon, great friends, okay? Very great. Lots of stuff on YouTube that's hilarious with them both together and all that sort of stuff. But I wouldn't say Ringo is the guy who changed the sound of drums in rock, if you know what I mean. Keith Moon definitely, just with his crazy style and all that sort of stuff. Now, I can't talk about Keith Moon without also bringing Mitch Mitchell, Jimi Hendrix's drummer, into the frame, because they were peas in a pod with their playing, very freestyle and all that sort of stuff. And both of those guys took their hats off to Ginger Baker of Cream, okay, who also brought two bass drums into rock, classics like Sunshine of Your Love and all that sort of stuff, and amazing, playing as well. But Keith Moon was just explosive and with his stuff, And then further on into the 70s, the Quadrophenia album and all that, he had this natural way of doing things. His fill-ins often followed the melodic line, what Roger Daltrey was singing, and that was always a great hint to me. Like once I picked that up, It gave me focus. You weren't always just playing, trying to push in your favourite lick, you know, like exercise 23 off of page 10 of your Fantastic Fillings to Die For book, or whatever it might be. You actually follow the melodic line, okay? And that's something that I found first with Keith Moon. And then getting into the 70s, I think you know who I'm going to be talking about, but getting into the 70s, another drummer who used to follow the melodic line in a progressive rock type of way was Jethro Tull's Barrymore Barlow, who John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, there, I've said the name, called the best drummer England has produced. That's a quote from John Bonham. So any of the Jethro Tull albums of the 70s that he's on, it, like Thick as a Brick, classic, Passion Play, much underrated album, and then Songs from the Wood. I mean, my God, the drumming is unbelievable. And instead of having riffs, or you might have a riff that goes he didn't do that. It was like so on like that. That's what's that? Velvet Green, I think, off of the Songs from the Wood album. Check it out. Just buy the thing. It's a classic. Okay, there you go. All right, and I've talked about John Bonham. How many times have I talked about John Bonham on the show? Forever. 1, 2, 3. Classic intro, rock and roll. One of the things about that particular thing, he was... I did a show on this about a month and a bit ago. Typical rock and roll drumming is... One of the big things about John Bonham, is the fact that he would layer up his beats, and I've done shows like that in past years, like back in 2008 I did a few shows on that too. But the thing is, and I did it just a month ago, where some of the early drummers, I'll throw back to Earl Palmer and some of the great drummers of 50s rock and roll drumming, would actually play in unison, so you get that kind of... Some twist, chubby checker, stuff like that. And John Bonham emulated that because Rock and Roll, the song by Led Zeppelin on their 4th album, was a tribute to who they were listening to when they were coming up in the 50s and 60s, when they were kids. And there you go. I'm into prog rock now, but I haven't mentioned Ian Pace of Deep Purple, one of the great rock drummers. And I was growing up listening to Ian Pace and John Bonham both together, like John Bonham with Immigrant Song, you know, that. I'm not going to sing, okay? Okay, there you go. And then both of them, John Bonham is famous for his 16th note triplets. Good Times, Bad Times off of Led Zeppelin's first album. And I always remember the first time I heard that. One of the bikies, I mean, as I've mentioned on the show, Dad used to run the Dan O'Connell Hotel in Carlton from 1963 until he retired in 1976. And around about 1969-70, I was the typical pub kid, picking up glasses and ashtrays and all of that. And the beer garden of the Dan O'Connell, once the folkies had finished all their Irish music, the Prickly Bush Folk Club, the bikies would come in. Dad had that sort of, you know, set up as a little bit of a neutral zone. I think that they were banned from every other pub or in the area, but Dad managed to keep them under control. They had a lot of respect for him, I think. And Dad had a little record player set up, and one of the bikies came in and sort of said, "Have a listen to this band," and it was like, you know, like ba 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 ba. raucous, but yeah, I always remember just going, what was that? You know, sort of thing. I want to do that. And it was, and that particular song, John Bonham and his 16th note triplets. Beautiful. And then both of them, John Bonham and Ian Pace from Deep Purple, are very famous for the lick of the century, which is this one. Oh, I love it. I'm getting excited. And Ian Pace is still going strong. And he's an amazing drummer as well. There you go. So there's that business. I've mentioned Barrymore, Barlow and all that, but I can't finish off this segment of 70s rock without mentioning some prog rock greats like Bill Bruford and all that. And then, of course, some of Frank Zappa's drummers. You had people like Chester Thompson and all that. Before him, even Ralph Humphrey and people like that off the Overnight Sensation album. Of course, there's good old Jimmy Carl Black, you know, from the early Mothers and all that. But really what captured everyone's attention was a young Terry Bozzio and Frank Zappa writing The Black Page, which I've demonstrated on the show quite a few times. Earlier on in the year, I did a whole show based on that. And Terry Bozzio captured everyone's imagination as well. So notice I'm jumping between American drummers and English drummers and all that. I'm just talking about rock. There you go. Okay, so that's my show tonight. Let's call that part one of some of the great drummers in rock history, rock and roll history from the early 50s. I've tried to mention the main dudes, okay? Now, please don't send me any hate mail or any trolling business simply because I've left off your favourite drummer. I've left off a few of mine as well. And what I've tried to do is sort of give you the idea of, you know, this much bandied about word genius and all that. And at the top of the show, I sort of, you know, said one definition of genius in music is someone who changes the sound of the instrument, okay, which I talked about in the first segment. So that's what I'm trying to do with these episodes. I've taken on the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, okay? So I suppose part two will be the 80s onward, okay? So I hope you enjoyed the show. My name is Chris Quinlan. If you'd like to contact me, it is drumshow@hotmail.com, and the website is thedrumshow.net. Okay, take care. I'll see you next week.